Welcome everyone to Foglight Skills 101, my first 80 hours as a Foglight admin. Today we'll discover easy, everyday tips that can significantly impact your role. We'll explore practical insights and techniques that will boost your understanding and confidence in managing Foglight from day one. Now please join me in welcoming Dermal, who will guide us through today's presentation.
Thanks, Jessica, for the intro. My name is Dermal. I'm a software sales engineer at Quest Software. I've been using Foglight for just over 20 years now, and we've done this session in the past, and it's gotten really good reviews and reception. Basically, your first X or 80 hours as a Foglight admin, right? So you get the Foglight admin password, you've got this new application called Foglight. What do you do? And so we hope to outline some of the steps that are going to be helpful in those first hours or weeks of owning Foglight. So the agenda today covers a fair bit of topics, but we want to start looking at the support and community resources that you have available. These will help you enhance your experience. They'll also drive some of the other topics that we're going to talk about. Look at version checks, make sure that we are supported. If not, what we can do to upgrade and go through the steps to make sure that's a seamless process. We'll then look at validating the deployment and also performing some security checks. Then we'll dive into some of the alarm settings, look at the new alarm templates, set up notification channels, and make sure that's all taken care of. And then finally, we'll look at report setup and access to dashboards. So for support and community resources, you probably want to bookmark support.quest.com/foglight. It will come up to the latest product release. I'm showing 7.10. By the time you're seeing this, we'll have 7.3 available. And the landing page gives you your portal. So you'll have things like your notifications and alerts. There might be an alert for a new product version. There might be an alert for a hotfix or a security fix. There's a critical tab for my account and notifications and alerts. So you want to make sure you're signed up for those. Verify that your contact detail is correct. Check your licenses, what products you're licensed for, and so on. The alerts give you a full detail by different product versions, by type, by date range. So you can look at any critical notifications, any releases, things like vulnerabilities that come up. We provide hotfixes and so on for those. And then probably the tab I look at the most when I'm working with my customers is to look at the product lifecycle and policy tab. And that's going to tell you the versions and the support status. And the column you want to pay attention to is the support discontinued column. So that'll tell you that version is not supported. If you're on one of those versions, you want to pay attention to the upgrade steps. We also had a session on doing the upgrades, getting into great detail on that. But this is a tab that's going to be critical to look at, especially when you take over Foglight. There's also Quest community support, which is community-based. There's generally other users, Quest staff that are on here. There's a set of blogs that I and my colleagues write quite often. Normally, if there's a question that comes into me from a customer, I'll turn it into a blog. Obviously, I'm not going to put personal details in there, but I find that the topic can be helpful to others. And then you have the forum, so Q&A, we have support on there as well, answering questions. I'm going to hop into a little demo now. There's a few more support resources that we have within Foglight. So one of the ones that's fairly new in the new UI is the search. So you can search for assets within your environment. So if I'm trying to find a machine, I'm trying to find a host, an instance, I can search for that and it'll bring up the relevant page that I can then just jump to. So I can jump right in, get details on that asset that's being monitored. Up in the top right, we used to call it help. It's now called documentation. That brings up the tab with all the online documentation, and this is very good. There's some very good resources in these, broken out by platform. I find the reference and the glossary to be very good. If I'm trying to find rules or metrics, I want to see what is being collected, what we're calling it internally to Foglight, things like that. It's a great place to go. We also have on this drop down the ability to contact support, ask the community, look at release notes. There's a topology mapping for some of the cartridges, so that gets into greater detail on various metrics. There's some settings you can jump into right away, get right into the administration page. And then as you dive into stuff, let's see, if I go into a dashboard, there's going to be some additional topical data over here. So things like jumping into the YouTube videos, getting direct help on very specific topics that are relevant to that page. There are some things that are available in the classic console. So this is the new console as of version 6. There is this button up here where we could jump right to the classic web console. One other tip you can do in the URL after the port, you can put in /console. There's no way back to the old one, so either you have a new tab open or you can replace console with AUI, and that'll get you back to where you were. When contacting support, since we're on the topic, the support section of administration. So you need to be a Foglight administrator, of course. We talked about getting the Foglight admin password, but you're always going to be asked for a support bundle. So the support bundle page lets you generate different types. I typically will do a management server bundle. And then if you're having problems with an agent manager or the connections that are on that agent manager, I would do an agent manager bundle as well. If it's using the built-in Foglam, it'll be part of the management server bundle. But you can do those, then you can download them to your laptop and then upload them and attach them directly to the support case. We also have an archive of all the Foglight 101 sessions. So there's the new section for these updated versions of the Skills 101s. And then the ones we started back in 2017, they're all organized by category. We'll send out these links in the follow-up email so you don't have to sit there and take them down. Another critical step, if you don't know your account manager, get to know your account manager. They're there to help you. They can provide details on the history of Quest in your organization, maybe not just with Foglight, but with other products. You can get project reports from PSO, find out what work has been done in the past. If you have any customizations, that becomes a step within the upgrade process. You want to make sure that those customizations get carried forward properly. And sometimes you might have some remaining hours with PSO, and that can be useful. And we're always here to help. So you can set up sessions, these tips and tricks sessions. We spend 45 minutes or so and just getting updated on questions you might have, going through the product, maybe covering some more in-depth topics for new users as well. We'll take a look at versions and upgrades and planning for those specifically. The management server version is found typically on the administration page, and that's what you are looking for and what's referenced on that product lifecycle page on support. You also should verify the cartridge versions for the databases, and sometimes you may update these independently from the server, the FMS, and that would be done if you're enabling new functionality and things like that. So within your administration page, just the administration banner, you can go to configuration. Configuration is going to tell you all about the management server. So whether it's federated or not, in this case, mine, step number 1 is showing standalone. Number 2 shows your version. The top number of the version is probably the more critical one. Foglight Home tells you where it's installed. So sometimes you might have to go and run something on the server, restart it, things like that. That's a good spot to know. Number 3 tells you the database. So where the repository is hosted, what host it's on, the type, the version of that. That's another part of upgrade planning. You might need to upgrade the SQL backend or the Oracle backend or whatever you're using. And then a question that comes up quite a bit is what JVM, what JDK is being used for Java. So several years ago now, we switched to the Azul Systems OpenJDK. So it's no longer using any component from Oracle. That's critical to know. Oracle sometimes wants to charge you a bit more. You can prove it with both that JDK information plus, just going to that server location. You can run Java dash version if you need to prove it. And then number 5 can be important. We'll pull any of the VM options from the config file, so the startup options for the FMS. So you can see if something like the startup or the max memory is set, if any other services are set to use specific parameters in the startup. Those are listed on that options line. It's also a good idea to verify the OS of the management server. Again, that factors into upgrade planning. And then looking at a bit more specific things like the ports, so the HTTP, the HTTPS port, you need to know those to connect, obviously, to the management server. They are stored in a config file, so if you happen not to be able to get to the UI, I've had some customers that have no idea what host it's on, where the UI is. That config will help get you there. And then also check the mail settings. So see if your mail server is set, what the reply is, what the ports. That's a good idea because that'll lead into notification channels, and it'll also tell you things. If you're getting emails from Foglight and you're not really sure how it's happening, where it's coming from, this will start to get you down that path. The cartridge inventory tab shows you what the cartridges, what the versions are that are enabled. There is a filter at the bottom of this page where you can just show enable cartridges. But that'll show you those point releases on the cartridges, and that could also help drive some of the upgrade discussion. And so like I said, we had a more in-depth session on this, but just some basic steps for upgrade planning. What needs to be upgraded? Do we have to do the FMS and or an agent manager and or cartridges? And then the urgency from that product lifecycle tab, that will help dictate your timeline. You want to do a backup, so backup everything, FMS, repository, the performance investigator database or databases. That's always a good idea. We can have a green environment or a test environment of Foglight. So you can set up another management server. Maybe you want to have one just to test to see what an out-of-the-box one looks like, things like that. There's no license for the FMS and agent manager components. So it might be a good idea to run through those steps in that environment first. And then if we're looking at upgrading Foglight for databases, I do this in my lab all the time. I just run the all-in-one installer. So it upgrades all components. You use the agent manager's dashboard to upgrade the Foglight agent managers. Some agents you also upgrade from that dashboard. If you're running SQL Server, Oracle, or DB2, you'll want to use the databases dashboard to do that. It's got a wizard, it steps through the process. There's some additional updates it does to the PI repositories, and that's the way to go. We'll get into deployment validation now. That's basically figuring out that your environment is sized properly. So there is a deployment guide for each version. We have slides, we have tables for the compute resources requirement. You want to look against your current implementation and make sure those are sized accurately. You can do this from, as a starting point anyways, from the agent manager dashboard. That'll give you the number of agents per agent manager. And then it'll also show any alarms as well as disconnected agent managers. And those can be symptoms of being undersized. Most often thing I'll see when an agent manager disconnects is because memory is too low. And so that deployment guide is back on support. It's under the technical documentation section, and you can pull down the resource type to show deployment guides, and that'll give you the right path to it. On the agent manager's dashboard, version column shows us the most recent release or the running version of the agent manager. The agent count shows you how many agents per agent manager. Up in the top right, there's that disconnected agent managers list. And so you want to verify that, see what's there. It is possible that something has just disconnected that's no longer in use. You can delete the agent manager from that dashboard as well. There's the JVM config column that will also give you the same detail from the management server dashboard, except it's those startup options for the agent manager. So if you set, and which you should set a start and a max memory and verify that it's within the requirements of the deployment guide. You can consider additional deployments. Like I said, there's no license for the FMS. You could implement one as a non-production, use it either for the test environment or use it as a green or vanilla FMS so we can see what's there out of the box, what's different. Maybe you're seeing some dashboards in your production environment that aren't there out of the box. You know that those are customizations or delivered from PSO. And you can run these in a very lightweight environment. I had a 2 CPU, 4 gig laptop. It ran perfectly fine. I just made sure I set those startup values for memory properly. Now we'll get into some of the security and audit checks. So a few steps here that I found important. Verify how users are connecting to Foglight. So if they're using the Foglight native logins, you want to verify that they're not all using, say, the Foglight login. That's equivalent to root or sysadmin. They could be using AD or LDAP verified login, or you might be using SAML for the single sign-on. You want to check the groups and roles that users are mapped to. So make sure, for example, that not everyone is part of the Foglight administrators or the Foglight security administrators group. That would be a critical thing to check. You can check for custom groups or roles, and that's where you can compare and contrast to that vanilla FMS that you could install and verify what's there out of the box. And then I would definitely make sure there's a backup admin login and obviously change the Foglight user password. So you do all this from the users and security dashboard, manage users, groups, and roles. That gives you all the detail that you need to see who belongs to what groups, what roles they have, and so on. Directory services, settings, it tells you right away. In my case, LDAP is not configured. I don't have users logging in directly with their LDAP login, but I do have SAML integration. So I can use the SAML link on the login page. It goes to whatever the provider is. In this case, we're using Microsoft Entra. It'll go through your two-factor authentication, authenticate you back into Foglight. And so the groups can show you both the roles and the users that belong to that group. So if I look at Foglight admin and then I say, in the user column, who does it contain? I can get that pop up, and then I can also do a search. So I've got 2 logins here in Foglight. My SAML login is part of the administrators. My native Foglight login is not. And that's what that's showing me. When we get to audit, there is a new audit dashboard that became available with the new UI. And so it shows you the changes that have happened, the operations that have occurred for a time period, along with the API calls and other aspects of product navigation. It is stored in the Foglight repository. It's one of the few tables that's user readable, and it's in the auditing log table. So we'll take a quick look at just the UI portion. It's very simple. You're basically providing a time range, and then you have a search box. So you can search for something within the grid, something that user Foglight did or that has Foglight into it. And you'll see a couple examples in my case. There's authenticate, there's clear alarm in the background, there's a REST resource access and things like that. And you can get a lot more fine-tuned with it. If you do want to query it, it's again that auditing log table. I just did a quick select top 1000, but you can obviously add a where clause You could look at breaking it down by service or method, or even something in the name column. You don't want to do a pattern match on that. And then obviously that data can be used elsewhere. Once we get into the database level, we have user level access that controls what users or what groups can access what is being seen on the database's dashboard. And we want to take a look, make sure those users and groups are mapped correctly, make sure they're still valid. And so we'll hop into a quick demo to illustrate that. So from the database's dashboard, we're just going to hop into settings and go to user level access. We don't have to pick an instance at that point. We're just looking at everything. And I'm just going to narrow it down, pick my ID. And so I get my two IDs, my SAML login plus my native. And it's going to show the mapping across the board. So my top login, it's got access to everything. This one has access to just 2 instances of Oracle, nothing across the rest of the platforms. But I also have a group assigned, right? So I can see, there might be a group here. I want to see what group it is, and there's my 2 Oracle instances, plus I've got this HANA and Redshift group, whatever's in that. I want to make sure that those are valid, of course, but that's what that user Darren can see. So it's just validating across the board, make sure people are set to see what they should be able to see. You can take a look at the user groups as well. So some of these, the ones that aren't grayed out in the background, these are the non-default security groups. So DBA Lockdown and SQL App DBA, that's something we've created since install. And again, you could have users belonging to that. That's where you go back to the users and security dashboard, verify who's in that group. But you'll see again, they've got access to certain platforms. They are locked down or locked out of other platforms. And they also have some groups that are assigned. So definitely check both of the tabs. When you do that grouping, it also applies to the new Query Insights dashboard. So that dashboard was built to show queries across the board. So everything that's being monitored in Foglight generates SQL or commands if you're using Mongo, for example. This behavior of what we see here, there's no filter at the top, there's no drop down, but it obeys that user level access mapping. So if I had that group set up for Darren where it can only see SAP HANA and Redshift or Snowflake or whatever it was, that's all I would see here. I wouldn't see queries from other platforms. Quick tip, just in case you do come into this to verify and Query Insights ever happens to be blank, you want to go back to that cartridge inventory and verify the SQL Profiler cartridge and just reset it. Sometimes there's a little hiccup. I find resetting it, you'll get all your Query Insights data back. We talked about knowing what's connecting to the FMS. So usually a first place to start, I'll go to the Agent Manager's dashboard. And this is where you can look at things like the agent count, doing your deployment validation, your disconnected agent managers. But I want to know what these are. I want to know what these hosts are, what the IP addresses are, where they're coming from, because they're sending data somewhere into your FMS. And so it's critical to take a look, understand what these mean, where they're located. You might have to do some research. You might have to go find a wiki or something internal to look at, but track those down, make sure they're all valid. In the same subset, you can look at agent status. And I take a look at the status column. So I usually resort this. And sometimes you might have to double click, but status just has a marker in the background so you can see all the disconnected ones at the top. These may be agents that you need to go fix. Some of them, if the user was thinking about this, they may have put a tag on it this one's inactive, this one's inactive, this one's just used to show, some property. It may not need to be running. But some of these we may want to go look and make sure, are these host agents, are these Postgres agents, etc. Are they supposed to be running? If not, you may have to go through the process of fixing them. You can export this table. It actually applies across Foglight. Most tables have this selector where you can export at the bottom. So you could take this away, bring it to an Excel, run through your list, start crossing them off, put an auto filter on, things like that, and work through. Another thing I find, just looking through the agents, and that's where the Excel part comes in, because you could put an auto filter on the type or the namespace, and you work your way through the known ones. We know what DB Oracle is, we know what Cassandra agent is, but you might have some custom agents, there might be some custom collector. You want to know what those are doing. You want to go find out what it's doing, what it's sending data to, and be prepared for that. We talked a little bit about the users and security access, verifying the users, verifying the groups. There is a role that I would definitely go take a look at, because it gives people external access beyond the GUI. So if we were to look at the API role, there is a role called API access. Verify that there's groups that aren't assigned, or if there is a group, go back to the group and see who has API access. You can also look through the user list, see if they're taking on that role. It is possible through the script console that you can query the security service and basically work backwards. Say, find a list of users that have API access role, for example. That's something you can do. And then when we talk about, there's different user things here going on. We looked at user level access on the databases dashboard. Within the database itself, so some platforms have this concept of a user-defined collection. And that's just a SQL statement that may be running. But I find it's good to know, what was set up, what is there. Maybe someone set up a SQL statement that is no longer valid, or it could be perhaps publishing some personal information and so on. Definitely get to know those. So I usually use the script console to do this. And what I'm going to do is, in the pull down, I'm going to type custom query. And so we'll see a list of platforms that have this custom query in them. There's DB2, Oracle, Azure SQL, and SQL Server. Those are the 4 platforms that do these user-defined collections now. But if I do something like, let me pick this one, and I'll list the instances. It's just going to go get a list of topologies that have that in their name. And so you could do it backwards. You could go instance by instance, jump down into the custom query, see what it's got, go from that point. But then you have to go one by one. It becomes pretty painful. This lets you just see across the board. Here's all the topology types that have this in it, and we'll see from there. So that list of queries came back, and we can see them all in the table here. One to pay attention to is the domain root, and that just tells you where the query is. So this first one, it's on an instance called SQL1, we've got SQL AG1, and so on. Again, you can export these tables. Actually, this one doesn't have the export on. We'll scratch that. But you can see where those queries are, and you can also see the name of it. So they'll all have platform, in this case, DBSS, customization or custom. We've got one for audit alarm, check disable collection policy. And you can jump into these, pick the details, and see what the object panel looks like if you need more detail. But at least it gives you the name of the query plus where it's located. So again, you can go back to this. You can actually go back and view the custom query there and see what's stored from a custom collection standpoint. So we'll jump into alarm analysis and review. we want to look at the alarm analysis dashboard. It's very useful, especially after Foglight's been running for some time. You can pick a time interval and then determine what alarms have fired. So there's a count column, sort it descending, see what the most frequent alarms are, even the severities that are firing the most. So I usually do some representative period, maybe 7 days, maybe a month, and then take a look at that tab, sort it by alarm count, and then you go through this review process. In this case, I have almost 2,500 job failure alarms within a week. I would take a look at those. Obviously, probably want to go and fix the jobs that are failing, but then determine if I really need that level of alarms, and then just work your way down the list. So you disable alarms that you're not going to respond to. You don't need that noise. You don't need that distraction. Sometimes the alarm will be useful, but maybe they're just too noisy. Maybe there's a severity that you don't need. You can adjust the thresholds. You can add exclusions. There is an alarms table, and you do need to be mindful of the number of alarms in that table, because it can be a drag on UI performance. A lot of dashboards, even if you're not seeing an alarm count or something like that, you might have a severity indicator, and that has to query that table to pick up the severity. And so there is an alarm automation pack. It is on the community. You can search for alarm automation. It's basically splitting out 2 rules from the old DB expansion pack. One of them is for clearing alarms, and one of those is for deleting alarms. And so when you install that pack, it's just a cartridge. You install it via cartridge inventory. You'll have this DB expansion pack alarms. And you've got clear after days, delete after days. The other column shows you the values. So any alarm older than 3 days gets cleared. The alarm is still there. It just has the flag set to clear. The other one is to delete. So after 30 days, the alarm gets removed from that alarm table. You can adjust those settings appropriately. They also ship disabled. So you would have to enable them through this dashboard. We don't want you putting that pack in place and then having your 30-day and older alarms just removed. So you do have to consciously enable the 2 rules. There's also some core alarms in Foglight that are important that you review, check that they're turned on or off, as the case may be. They do not show in the alarm templates. There is no template for core, so you do have to go to the rules dashboard and take a look at them. They're meant to self-monitor Foglight, looking at different conditions like server performance, your license status, agent manager status, and so on. There is a bigger topic around automation and self-monitoring that we may cover down the road. So from that rules dashboard, again, you just pick the cartridge and it's core monitoring policy that you look at. I've highlighted some of the rules that I feel are important. Things like agent health state. Does the agent still collect? Is it up and running? Are there any admin issues? It's a weekly email basically that you should take a look at. There is a garbage collector check, and that can impact the performance of the server. If it's being done too frequently, you want to have this alarm set to notify of that. We do check the number of alarms in that table. So that's that catalyst number of alarms check. How many are in the table lets you know that there's perhaps an excess number there. Getting into the disconnected agent manager clients. So figure out if something disconnects. That's usually pretty critical. Right? You could lose all your agents that are on that agent manager. You want to have that alarm turned on and probably have notifications set to your email. And then if you're using HTTPS for your FMS, you can check to see when the cert expires. So mine's set there at 30 days. That's usually a good lead time to go and get an updated cert. Once you get into platform-specific alarms, under the alarm management tab on the left, take a look at notification management. Just verify that channels are in place and what the channels are doing, right? So I've got a channel here, critical alerts production, but it's going to a personal email, right? So that might be something that could raise a flag. You may want to check that. Maybe that's someone that was here in the past. Make sure these are all valid. We internally set most of ours to a Teams channel, right? Get the address off a Teams channel, have the alarms go there, and just simplify it, put everything there in one spot. We'll get into report setup. Generally, once you have a bit more time with Foglight, check with your users, find out what reports they need to have. Verify the reports that are scheduled are actually valid and someone's looking at them, that they're using them. With that report schedule, you want to take a look at the schedules that are in place. I had an issue a couple of years back. We just had this horrible performance hit every 5 minutes. And it turned out there is an every 5 minutes schedule. Someone had scheduled a report that queried all the hosts, and it just dragged performance down. So it's an interesting spot to look, and good to validate, make sure that they actually are being used, and if it does need to be every 5 minutes, that it's a valid use case. And then finally, you can clean up any saved reports. So you do that all from the reports dashboard. There's a manage reports dashboard within that menu. I like to sort initially the scheduled ones by the schedule, and then I can look down the list and I can see things like, I've got these hourly reports set. I think these were done in our case for a demonstration. So I'd go ahead and probably either clear them or just set them to disabled. You can also look in the bottom of the dashboard and see how many generated reports are kept. That's the retain column in the table above. So how many last X copies of that report we're going to save to the Foglight server. And I just use the little scroll bar on the right to see that I've got 555 copies of reports there, probably not being used. You can select all on that, hit delete. It cleans up some storage for you. We'll take a look at dashboard access now. And this is more to do with any custom dashboards. So checking to see if we've got custom dashboards that are sitting out there. You can look at the My Dashboards panel or under your login ID on the left-hand side for your current logged in user. You can also go to the configuration dashboard and look at definitions for any other dashboards. As you get more familiar with Foglight and the users, you can start looking at additional audiences for dashboard and report access. So maybe developer needs some access to SQL execution, which is a perfect use case for query insights. Maybe there's an operations team that just needs an alarm list or a green light, red light type dashboard. So that's all future tasks you can look at. When we get into those definitions, the other user definitions node, that shows all the users that have created a custom dashboard. And so you can pick that user, you can select the views, pull down, and you can see all of the dashboards that user has done. Some may be descriptive, some may not be descriptive, but go ahead and verify that that those are actually valid and have information on it that might not be sensitive and so on. And we did have on the invite, if you still have time, we're going to deploy some additional agents and so on. This is more than enough to get you started on Foglight. You will not have more time at this point. But in the future, we will do a presentation on some utility agents, things like Web Monitor, Net Monitor, Log Filter Agent, using services for dashboard building, things like that. So stay tuned to the invites in the future. We'll probably be doing that in a few months. Thank you very much for your time today. Go ahead and scan the QR code. That gets you into the series registration. Next episode is coming up. Episode 4 will be Mastering SQL Server Performance with Janice Griffin. Looking forward to being on that as well. Thank you for your time.